The Whitmore dining table was filled with laughter as Gregory Kane recounted another courtroom victory while Diane sat silent, her untouched plate cooling before her. The sound of his voice had always dominated these gatherings, filling the air with stories of triumphs and praise. For years, Diane had sat at this same table, her presence a shadow next to her brother's shining figure. Tonight, as silver cutlery clinked against china and wine glasses glimmered beneath the chandelier, she knew the pattern had not changed. This chapter sought to reveal the truth that had shaped Diane since childhood. She had never been seen, never been celebrated. While Gregory's smallest achievements were magnified, hers were dismissed as trivial. It was not cruelty in its most obvious form. Rather, it was the steady, piercing dismissal that came from being overlooked again and again until invisibility felt like destiny. The Whitmore home, tucked in a quiet Chicago suburb, seemed almost theatrical on this Thanksgiving evening. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air. Cranberry sauce glistened in a crystal bowl. A pumpkin pie waited near the sideboard, untouched until dessert. The old oak dining table stretched the length of the room, polished to a glow by Eleanor Whitmore herself. Photographs of Gregory's milestones decorated the walls: his law school graduation, his first courtroom win, his engagement. Diane noticed, as always, the near absence of herself from the gallery of frames. Around the table, the family gathered. Charles Whitmore, proud patriarch, sat at the head, his hand gripping the carving knife with solemn authority. Beside him, Eleanor leaned forward eagerly, her eyes fixed on Gregory. Across the table, aunts and uncles nodded as Gregory described a senator's praise for his recent legal brief. The room hummed with approval. Diane, seated 3 places down, attempted to speak when a cousin politely asked, "And Diane, what are you working on these days?" She straightened, prepared to mention the new charter contracts she had secured at her company. But before a full sentence left her lips, Gregory leaned back, smirking. "Still working those airplanes?" he quipped, lifting his glass. "She's always been fascinated by them, but I'm convinced she just wants the free peanuts." The table erupted with laughter. Even her father chuckled, shaking his head as if it were a harmless joke. The cousin looked embarrassed, murmured something about the weather, and quickly diverted attention back to Gregory's story. Diane lowered her gaze to her plate, her words swallowed with the lump in her throat. As the evening wore on, Gregory dominated the conversation. Charles offered toasts to his son's bright future, his voice booming with pride. "To Gregory," he declared, "our shining light, the one carrying the Whitmore name forward." Glasses clinked, and once again, Diane's accomplishments remained unspoken, her very existence overshadowed. Inside, anger curled through her like smoke. She remembered countless dinners like this, birthdays, where her own candles were blown out too soon because Gregory had a story to tell. Graduations where her honors were brushed aside as mere formalities compared to his triumphs. Tonight, she told herself, would be the last time she sat passively while her identity was reduced to nothing. When the plates were cleared and coffee poured, Gregory leaned back, pride swelling. "It's not easy being the one to make the family proud," he said, smiling at Eleanor as she beamed. Then, turning to Diane, he added in a tone both mocking and final, "But hey, someone has to collect the trash while the rest of us change the world." The laughter that followed sliced into Diane like glass. Her mother's chuckle, her father's indulgent grin, even the murmured amusement of distant cousins, it all pressed into her chest until her breath caught. She forced her fingers to relax around the stem of her wine glass. She lifted it slowly, bringing the ruby liquid to her lips. No one noticed her silence. No one asked how she felt. The performance of Gregory Kane, the golden child, had eclipsed her once again. But in that quiet, something unspoken stirred inside Diane. Her reflection in the glass caught her eye steady, unflinching, determined. She sipped the wine deliberately, as though sealing an unspoken promise. "One day," she thought, "one day you will all see who I truly am." An elegant ivory envelope arrived in Diane's mailbox, her brother's wedding invitation, but something was missing. The handwriting on the front was carefully looped, as if meant to impress. A wax seal in the corner gleamed faintly in the light of her apartment. Diane carried it inside with a faint smile, setting aside her leather briefcase. For a moment, she felt a flicker of something almost forgotten hope. Perhaps this would be different. Perhaps Gregory had finally chosen to include her properly in his world. She poured herself a glass of water, slid a finger beneath the flap, and drew out the thick cardstock. At first, her breath caught at the grandeur of the design. The calligraphy spelled out Gregory Kane and Madeline Cross, with every curve of ink shimmering against gold-pressed borders. Beneath, the ceremony details were printed in elegant script. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, a reception to follow at the Pierre Hotel. Diane's eyes moved carefully down the page, but her brow furrowed. The words "reception to follow" were nowhere. She flipped the card over, searching for the second insert, the directions, the list of venues. Nothing. There was no reception invitation for her. The same bitter taste from countless childhood evenings rose in her throat. Once more, she was the afterthought. She set the card on her kitchen counter, staring at it as if it might change, as if an error might correct itself. Hours later, she dialed her brother's number. It rang 3 times before his voice came through, sharp and hurried. "Cassandra, sorry, Diane. I'm in the middle of preparations for the biggest day of my life." "What's so urgent?" His tone dripped with irritation. "I received your invitation," she began, steadying her voice. "Congratulations, Gregory. It's a beautiful card, but there must be a mistake. There are no reception details included." There was silence, then a sigh, heavy with condescension. "Right. About that. The reception is, well, it's going to be very high class. Senators, CEOs, people Madeline's family moves with. It's exclusive." "Exclusive?" Diane asked, her heart thudding. "Yes," Gregory said, almost sounding amused. "Look, it might be uncomfortable for everyone. What would Elizabeth's parents think if they knew my sister collects garbage from passengers? You can attend the ceremony. The reception, it's for a different class of people." The words landed like blows. Diane gripped the phone tighter. "I don't collect garbage, Gregory. I work in aviation executive management." He chuckled, that dismissive laugh she had grown to hate since childhood. "Sure, if that's what you want to call it. But we both know you're basically a flight attendant. And that's respectable, I guess. But it's not the kind of career that fits in with the people at this wedding. You understand?" The old wounds reopened with force. He hadn't even cared to learn who she really was. Not once had he asked. To him, she had remained frozen in a role he had invented, someone beneath him, someone safe to dismiss. Diane's hand shook, but her voice came out calm. "Do you have any idea what I actually do for work?" "I don't have time for this," Gregory snapped. "Elizabeth and I are meeting with the florist in 20 minutes. Come to the ceremony, or don't. It's up to you." The line went dead. Diane sat in silence, the phone heavy in her hand. The humiliation sank deeper when she called her parents later that night. "Mom, Dad, did you know Gregory excluded me from the reception?" Her mother's voice came light, almost distracted. "Oh, sweetheart, don't take it personally. It's a very exclusive event. The governor might be there." "So you knew," Diane whispered, her throat tight. Charles Whitmore's voice filled the receiver, stern and defensive. "Your brother is marrying into a very influential family. This wedding matters for his career. He's right to be cautious about appearances." "Appearances?" Diane's voice cracked. "What exactly about me would embarrass him?" There was silence. Then Eleanor murmured gently, "Maybe if you had gone into a more professional field, like we suggested, it would be different." The implication was clear. She was not good enough. She had never been good enough in their eyes. Diane stared across her apartment, at the models of private jets displayed neatly on her bookshelf, at the framed certificates of achievement, at the photographs of her company's early flights. None of it mattered to them. To her own family, she was still the invisible daughter with an insignificant job. Her chest rose and fell as the final clarity settled in. "Thank you," she said at last. "Thank you for being honest. I will not be attending the ceremony either. In fact, I think it's best if we don't have a relationship at all moving forward." "Don't be dramatic," Charles barked. "This is exactly the kind of emotional reaction that proves Gregory's point." "Fine," Diane replied with a cold finality. "Then consider this my last conversation with you." She ended the call. She walked to the wide glass windows of her apartment, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The city glowed beneath her, skyscrapers lit against the evening sky. Her penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of traffic far below. The irony pierced her. The career they mocked had given her this life, this view, this independence, yet to them she would always be less. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hand steady now. For years she had carried the ache of wanting their approval. Tonight, she let it burn away. She owed them nothing. Diane sat at her counter, the ivory invitation lying open, the embossed lettering gleaming in the lamplight. She touched it once, then slid it aside with disdain. "From this moment on," she whispered, "I owe you nothing." Long after midnight, Diane sat in the dim glow of her desk lamp, drafting her first business plan while the city slept. The apartment around her was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears and made even the scratch of a pen sound like thunder. Stacks of aviation manuals and ledgers surrounded her. Sticky notes clung to the wall in neat rows, and the faint aroma of cold coffee lingered from a forgotten cup. The sting of Gregory's rejection was still raw, but it had lit something inside her. If her family believed she was nothing, she would build something so undeniable that even they would be forced to see her. Her path forward was clear in her mind, though it was daunting. The goal of this chapter in her life was no longer simply survival. It was transformation. She would turn every humiliation into fuel. She would use every dismissal as a reason to push further. The betrayal she had endured was now the scaffolding for revenge, not in words or confrontations, but in the only language her family respected: success. Her setting could not have been more humble. By day, she worked at McGill Regional Airlines, a small carrier that served Midwestern cities with outdated planes. The office they gave her barely qualified as such, just a folding table shoved between filing cabinets in a windowless corner of the airport. The carpet was threadbare, the paint was peeling, and the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. It was the lowest rung of aviation, a place where careers often stagnated. Yet for Diane, it was the foundation stone. The people around her were varied. There was Victor Harrington, the gruff operations director with decades of experience, who barked orders but whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Most of her co-workers trudged through shifts like clock hands moving in circles, resigned to the mediocrity of their lot. But Diane was different. She stayed late. She asked questions. She scribbled diagrams of flight schedules and maintenance rotations in her notebooks. The mechanics noticed her curiosity and let her watch as they worked, explaining the engines and safety protocols. Dispatchers taught her about routing flights, and pilots told her about fuel calculations and weather systems. Piece by piece, she stitched together knowledge no one else bothered to gather. The progression of her days was grueling. She woke before dawn, worked 10 hours at the airline, then spent nights studying business management at community classes. Weekends vanished into overtime. More than once she fell asleep at her desk, her cheek pressed against a chart of aircraft rotations. Yet even in exhaustion, her determination hardened. The humiliation from her family's laughter echoed in her ears, driving her to stay awake when her body begged for sleep. One night, Victor caught her in the office at 3 a.m. She had been reorganizing the paper files and creating a digital database of schedules. "What in God's name are you doing here, Whitmore?" he barked. his voice startling her. She turned, embarrassed, but explained her project and how it could save time and money. He stood silently, arms crossed, watching her point out inefficiencies and risks. Finally, he gave a short grunt. "You've got nerve. Keep it up." That small recognition meant more than any compliment her family had ever offered. Months passed, and Diane built her plan in secret. She saw a gap in the market. Executives and business leaders frustrated by unreliable charter flights. She imagined a fleet that combined the precision of major airlines with the flexibility of private service. Her plan grew thick with calculations, charts, and projections. When she finally presented it, Victor arranged a meeting with investors. Diane walked into a mahogany-paneled boardroom, her palms damp, clutching her folders. The men around the table looked at her with skepticism, some smirking, others yawning. She spoke clearly, outlining the vision, the numbers, the opportunity. But most dismissed her quickly. "Too young," one said flatly. "Too risky," muttered another. "A woman in this industry?" scoffed a third. Their rejections seared her, but she kept her composure. Only one voice stood apart. Patricia Winters, a venture capitalist with silver hair and eyes sharp as glass. She grilled Diane for hours, tearing into every assumption. Diane defended each point with clarity, refusing to yield. At last, Patricia leaned back with a smile. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago," she said. "I'll fund half, find the rest." The climax of her struggle came just outside that boardroom. One of the older men, shaking his head, muttered as he passed her, "You'll never compete in this industry." The words burned into her chest. Diane stepped into the cold evening air, trembling, her breath forming pale clouds. But instead of despair, resolve coursed through her veins. She whispered to herself, "Watch me." She returned home and placed her worn shoes by the door, staring out the window as a private jet roared across the night sky. The engines glowed red against the darkness, streaking a path of power and possibility. Diane stood in silence, her reflection faint against the glass, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine her name painted boldly on the side of a jet. A sleek aircraft rose into the clouds, its lights blinking steadily. Diane followed it with her eyes, her pulse steady, her mind unwavering. That future would be hers. A sleek private jet takes off in the night sky. Diane watching, imagining her name painted on its side. As chandeliers sparkled above the crystal ballroom, cameras rolled the Whitmore daughter no one had believed in was about to marry in the most public way possible. It had been years since Diane had spoken to her parents or brother, years since she had chosen silence over begging for scraps of recognition. Now, standing in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, with Jonathan Pierce's steady hand in hers, she felt the power of distance. The bitterness of past betrayals lingered in memory, but tonight they transformed into the backdrop for triumph. Once she had been mocked for working airplanes. Now she stood at the pinnacle of luxury, with her empire revealed before the world. The purpose of this night was larger than love, though her love for Jonathan was genuine and deep. It was about declaring, before friends, allies, and strangers, that she was no longer invisible. This wedding was her statement, her revenge made flesh and light. The setting could not have been grander. The crystal ballroom of Chicago's historic Blackstone Hotel glowed with thousands of candles reflected in gilded mirrors. Velvet drapes framed windows that looked out over Lake Michigan, and crystal glasses sparkled in neat rows, along tables laden with roses. Beyond the guests, cameras circled silently, capturing every angle for the documentary crew. Producers had promised the footage would air nationwide on a lifestyle network, and Diane had agreed not from vanity, but because it would place her company before millions. The characters around her reflected her new reality. Jonathan, calm and loyal, walked with her into the hall, his eyes shining with pride. Victor Harrington, her mentor, sat near the front, His weathered face softened with uncharacteristic emotion. The room was filled with client CEOs, senators, film producers, people who had once tested her resilience and now depended on her aircraft. Absent, however, were Charles, Eleanor, and Gregory. They had not been invited. Diane had long ago decided that the people in this room should be those who had lifted her up, not torn her down. The progression of the evening unfolded like a carefully orchestrated performance. The vows were personal, words written not by tradition but by truth. Diane spoke of building from nothing, of finding love in Jonathan that strengthened her without diminishing her. Applause followed, not polite but warm and genuine. Guests leaned forward, engaged not by spectacle but by sincerity. Then came the reception, and with it, the unveiling. As dinner was served, the documentary crew wove footage of Diane's life into the night. On large screens, clips of her jets streaking across skies appeared. Narration explained how Skyline Aviation had risen from a single leased aircraft to a fleet serving global leaders. Celebrities offered recorded messages of praise, speaking of her discretion and excellence. Even her philanthropic work was highlighted: scholarships for young women in aviation, programs that mirrored her own struggles. Across town, in their suburban home, Charles and Eleanor Whitmore watched the broadcast. The glow of the television lit their faces, frozen in disbelief. Gregory sat stiffly on the couch, his hand clenched into a fist. He had told the world his sister was a flight attendant, a mere servant in the skies. Yet here was Diane, revealed as an industry leader, her name whispered by senators and magnates. He had spent his life striving to impress. The climax of the night came during the toasts. Jonathan spoke first, raising his glass to a woman who built her empire not from privilege, but from perseverance. Victor followed, voice unsteady as he admitted, "I have never seen anyone take so many dismissals and turn them into engines for success." The room rose with applause, echoing off the ballroom walls. Diane's eyes lingered on the cameras. She knew who would see this. She could picture Gregory's smirk faltering, Eleanor's knitting slipping from her hands, Charles's stern jaw tightening as pride and shame warred inside him. For the first time, they would see her as she truly was, not the shadow at their table, but the figure commanding her own world. As the evening waned, Diane slipped into the hall outside the ballroom. She leaned against a marble pillar, closing her eyes as the sounds of celebration drifted behind her. She thought of the Thanksgiving when Gregory mocked her into silence, of the night she sat drafting a business plan by lamplight, of the phone call when her parents told her she was an embarrassment. Every moment of pain had led here. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. 27 missed calls blinked across the screen, and all from familiar numbers. Her parents, her brother, even extended relatives she had not spoken to in years. They had seen the documentary. They knew now. The silence she had once endured was replaced by desperation from the very people who had rejected her. She pressed the phone against her chest, feeling its faint vibration, but she did not answer. Not yet. That night, Diane's phone lights up with 27 missed calls from her family. She lets it ring. Security guards at Skyline Aviation's marble lobby informed Diane, "Your family is here." All of them. For a moment she thought she had misheard. She had spent years cultivating silence between herself and the Whitmores, years in which her success had bloomed beyond their comprehension. Yet now, on an ordinary afternoon, they were waiting downstairs, desperate to breach the fortress she had built. The sting of their rejection at Gregory's wedding still hovered in her memory, but the televised images of her own wedding had reversed the roles entirely. Once, she had stood outside their circle, begging for recognition. Now they stood in her lobby, asking to be let in. The goal of this encounter was no longer to prove her worth. That had already been done. Tonight was about power, about shifting the family dynamic permanently. Diane would listen, but she would not yield. The betrayal of her exclusion had forged her resolve. This confrontation would be on her terms, not theirs. The lobby of Skyline Aviation's headquarters gleamed like a palace of glass and steel. The marble floors reflected light from towering windows, and a polished scale model of her flagship Gulfstream jet stood encased in glass near the reception desk. Staff moved briskly, pausing only to glance curiously at the four figures waiting nervously near the entrance: Charles and Eleanor Whitmore, older now and diminished; Gregory Kane, shoulders rigid; his wife Madeline clinging to his arm. Their presence seemed strangely small against the grandeur of the empire Diane had built. Diane descended from the mezzanine, heels clicking against marble. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in quiet authority. Jonathan had offered to stand beside her, but she had refused. This was hers alone to face. Her parents rose as she approached. Eleanor's eyes filled instantly with tears. "Diane, you look wonderful," she whispered, reaching as if to embrace her. Diane held her distance, her expression calm. "May I ask," she said evenly, "why you've come to my office unannounced?" Charles cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "We have been trying to reach you for days. You wouldn't answer our calls." "I received your messages," she replied, her voice steady. "I wasn't ready to respond." Gregory stepped forward, his face pale. "Cassie, Diane, we saw your wedding, the documentary. Why didn't you ever tell us about all of this?" He gestured around at the gleaming lobby, the scale model jets, the subtle hum of success that filled the air. "Would it have mattered?" Diane asked quietly. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" Gregory's jaw tightened. "Of course it would have. If we had known you were this successful, that," she cut in sharply, "is exactly the problem." Her words echoed across the lobby. "You only value me now because of what I have, not who I am. For years you laughed at me, excluded me, dismissed me as an embarrassment. And only now, when my wealth and power are undeniable, do you come seeking connection?" Eleanor began to cry openly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "That's not fair, Diane. We have always loved you. Love without respect," Diane answered, "is not love I am interested in." The conversation grew heavier. Charles shifted, his voice low. "We made mistakes. We were wrong about you. We want to make it right." Diane studied their faces one by one. Her father's pride cracked by regret. Her mother's tears. Gregory's discomfort twisting into shame. Madeline, silent until now, finally spoke, her voice uncertain. "Many of our wedding guests flew on your jets. The Prestons, the Whitfields, Senator Collins. They spoke so highly of you. We truly didn't know." The irony almost made Diane laugh. The very people Gregory had been so eager to impress were her clients all along. She allowed herself only the faintest smile. The climax of the moment came when she stepped closer, her voice rising with the clarity of revelation. "Being family did not stop you from cutting me out of your lives. It did not stop you from mocking my work or excluding me from your celebrations. Family is not a word to be used when convenient. It is a relationship built on respect. And respect is something I never received from any of you." The silence that followed was thick. For the first time, Charles and Eleanor looked small, not imposing. Gregory, once the golden child, stood exposed, his arrogance stripped away. Diane glanced at her watch, then back at them. "I have a meeting to return to. I cannot continue this conversation now." Her mother's voice broke in desperation. "Will you at least consider talking to us again? Perhaps dinner?" She paused, considering. They were still her blood, though the wounds ran deep. Slowly, she nodded once. "I will think about it, but only if you respect the boundaries I set. And that begins with this. Do not come to my workplace again. If I choose to speak with you, I will reach out." Their faces flickered with a mix of hope and despair. Eleanor clutched Charles's arm. Gregory's eyes lowered. Madeline nodded quietly, as if grateful for even that small concession. Diane turned, her heels striking firmly against the marble as she walked back toward the elevator. She did not look back. She cannot continue this conversation now. She tells them firmly, "If I ever allow you back into my life, it will be on my terms. Never again on yours." She walks away, leaving them stunned. 6 months later, Diane sat at a private dining room table, her family across from her, waiting nervously to see if a new relationship was possible. The moment was surreal. She remembered the lobby of Skyline Aviation, their pleading faces, the trembling apologies. That memory hovered like a ghost above this dinner, a reminder of how fragile and fractured they still were. But the time since then had softened certain edges. They had respected her boundaries, limiting themselves to careful text messages and notes of regret. Tonight was not about old humiliation, it was about testing whether something new could be built from the wreckage. The goal of this meeting was not reconciliation for its own sake, but clarity. Diane wanted her family to understand that if they remained in her life, it would be under rules that honored her worth. It was not revenge now, but redemption on her terms. The setting reflected the seriousness of the occasion. The private dining room belonged to an exclusive Chicago restaurant, one that Diane often used for negotiations with powerful clients. A round table stood beneath a chandelier of frosted glass. The faint scent of polished wood and roasted lamb lingered in the air. A single waiter hovered discreetly in the background, ensuring the Whitmores had no excuse to slip into casual familiarity. This was formal. This was businesslike. The characters who filled the room looked changed, though Diane studied them carefully to test whether that change was real. Charles, once booming and proud, now seemed smaller. His shoulders stooped. Eleanor, her mother, looked at Diane with tentative eyes that no longer carried the old casual dismissal. Gregory Kane sat beside Madeline, his suit immaculate, but his demeanor subdued. Madeline's hand rested over her husband's as though to steady him. Across from them, Jonathan Pierce offered Diane a reassuring glance, his calm presence anchoring her in the storm. The dinner began awkwardly. Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice unsteady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We've missed you terribly." Diane lifted her glass of water, her tone even. "What exactly have you missed, Mother? For years before I cut ties, we barely spoke beyond pleasantries." Her mother flushed, caught in the truth. Charles spoke instead. "Perhaps we did not know how to connect with you. Your interests always seemed so different." "Different from Gregory's," Diane corrected softly, "because his interests always aligned with what you valued." Gregory shifted, guilt flickering across his face. For the first time, he spoke without arrogance. "I was jealous, Diane. I see that now. I was always the one praised, the golden child. And then suddenly you appeared on television with senators and celebrities, running an empire. I realized how blind I had been and how cruel." She listened, weighing his words. His confession sounded raw, not rehearsed. "That still doesn't explain why you deliberately excluded me from your wedding reception." His shoulders slumped. "I was insecure. I wanted to impress Madeline's family, and I thought you weren't impressive enough." He faltered, swallowing hard. "I was wrong." Silence followed, broken only by the clink of silverware. Diane leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "Do you know who many of your illustrious guests were that night?" "Clients of mine. The governor you paraded with? He's flown with my company for 3 years. The media CEO your wife's family praised? I had flown him to Tokyo the week before your wedding." The shock on their faces was nearly comical, though Diane felt no triumphantly calm certainty. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand trembling. "We failed you. I failed you. As your mother, I should have seen you. Instead, I made assumptions. I'm so sorry." For the first time in decades, Diane felt the sincerity of her words. "Yes," she said quietly, "you failed me. But I also need to thank you. Being overlooked made me self-reliant. Being underestimated made me determined. Without your blindness, I might never have built what I have." Madeline, who had been silent, spoke softly. "The woman I saw in that documentary was inspiring. I hope we can get to know her, the real you, if you'll let us." The meal continued, and gradually the atmosphere softened. Charles asked genuine questions about skyline aviation, listening with interest instead of condescension. Eleanor shared small stories about neighbors and family, but this time with gentleness, not superiority. Gregory remained quiet, humbled. The climax of the night arrived as dessert was served. Diane laid down her fork and spoke clearly. "If we are to move forward, it must be authentic. No more assumptions, no more dismissing my choices. If you want a relationship with me, it must be built on respect." Her parents nodded fervently. Gregory swallowed hard and whispered, "That's fair. More than fair." Diane let the silence settle, then added, "I am not promising instant forgiveness. Trust will take time, but I am willing to begin." Relief washed over their faces like a tide. Later that month, Jonathan and Diane invited them to her penthouse. The Chicago skyline glowed outside the tall windows, a panorama of light stretching to the horizon. As they gathered in the living room, Diane stood with Jonathan's hand in hers. "We have an announcement," she said, her voice steady but warm. "We're expecting a child." Her parents' expressions shifted from shock to joy. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Charles smiled with genuine pride. Gregory even managed a smile, though his gaze lingered with unspoken regret. That night, after everyone had gone, Diane and Jonathan stood on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against their faces. She leaned into him, whispering the vow that anchored everything. "Our child will never grow up questioning their worth." In the end, Diane's journey reminds us of the fragile threads that bind a family together and the devastating power of betrayal when those threads are cut. She had once been the overlooked daughter, her worth measured by dismissive glances and cruel laughter, yet she rose from silence and humiliation to build a life so strong that even those who had dismissed her were forced to reckon with the truth. It was not money alone that gave her power, but the resilience to keep moving when no one else believed in her. Family is meant to be a place of shelter, a circle where loyalty and love prevail. But when favoritism blinds parents, when arrogance poisons siblings, the very foundation of family cracks. Diane's story reveals how quickly respect can vanish when appearances are prized above genuine connection. Her exclusion from her brother's wedding was not just a social slight, it was the cruel echo of years of being told she was never enough. And yet, betrayal does not always end in destruction. It can ignite transformation. Diane did not seek revenge with bitterness or cruelty. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose, her rejection into resolve. Justice came not with vengeance, but with success so undeniable that it spoke louder than any defense she could ever have given. When her family returned, humbled and desperate, she no longer needed their approval. She stood firmly on her own ground, offering reconciliation only on her terms. In this way, the story teaches us that justice sometimes comes quietly. It arrives not in fiery confrontations, but in the calm certainty of a life well lived. Loyalty, when it is true, builds strength that outlasts betrayal. Betrayal, when it cuts deep, can plant the seeds of a future stronger than any the betrayer could imagine. True family is not measured by blood alone, but by respect, by honesty, and by the courage to see one another clearly. For Diane, forgiveness was possible, but only after boundaries were drawn. Respect had to be the currency of this new relationship, and in choosing to move forward, she revealed a greater truth, that redemption is possible, but only if those who have wounded us are willing to change. She offered them a chance, but she never surrendered her dignity again. To every listener, this tale is both a caution and a comfort. Guard your loyalty carefully. for it is the most precious gift you can give. Never mistake appearances for worth, nor dismiss those whose quiet determination may one day outshine every title and accolade. Families fracture when greed and pride eclipse love, but they can be rebuilt when respect and humility return. Philosophy remains. Our true worth is never defined by others, it is defined by the courage to live authentically, no matter who fails to see our light. If this story moved you, if you felt the sting of Diane's rejection and the triumph of her justice, then type number 1 in the comments. And remember, subscribe to our channel to hear the next story of betrayal, resilience, and redemption. For in every family saga lies a lesson, and in every lesson, a chance to discover what loyalty and justice truly mean.